On Point with Craig's Investment Partners.
The information provided here is general in nature. It's not financial advice. It doesn't take into account your financial situation, objectives, goals, or risk tolerance. All investments are subject to risks and none are guaranteed. So before you make any investment decisions, we recommend you contact an investment advisor. For more information about our services in that regard, you can go to our website, which is craigsip.com. Welcome to On Point. I'm Mark Lister, Investment Director at Craig's Investment Partners, and I'll be talking about a range of topics, including economics, portfolio strategy, investor education, and anything else that's happening out there in financial markets. Afternoon, all. Hope you enjoyed that election coverage on Saturday night. Pretty interesting stuff. I thought I would jump on here and record something quickly, just with my initial thoughts. Geez, lots of interesting results came through. A few surprises, but I guess the key thing is that we've got to change the government. That has been confirmed. We don't know 100% what it will quite look like, but Christopher Luxon from the National Party is set to be our new Prime Minister in time. The preliminary figures, and they are just preliminary because we haven't seen the counting of special votes, and there's still a few hurdles to cross. So the preliminary figures definitely reflected a stronger showing than many people were expecting from the National Party. 39%. That's a solid result. I think many, even national supporters, would have been expecting the mid-30s rather than the high 30s. That's definitely raised hopes of a national ACT government, which might not need any assistance from New Zealand First. However, don't get your hopes up if you are hoping for that quite straightforward two-party coalition, because there are still a few twists and turns to come, I suspect, in the results for this election. That 61 seat majority that the preliminary numbers suggest National and ACT will have makes for a very slim margin. You've got 121 seats in the Parliament, and 61 is the minimum that you would need to have a majority. So they're only just there. And that's really important because we haven't seen the special votes counted yet. And the special votes, there are a lot of special votes, and if you're a late enroller, if you are overseas, if you are off doing your OE, if you were in hospital, there's all sorts of reasons why people might do a special vote, and there's quite a few of them. 567,000 this year, to be precise. And that is a little more than 20% of the total votes. So that's a lot. We're sort of only 80% there, really. You've still got 20% to be counted. And while they won't dramatically change the landscape, in recent history, the special votes have typically favoured the left, the likes of Labour, the Green Party, Tapati Mutu. You think back to 3 years ago, and there were nearly as many special votes then, not quite as many. I think it was about 17% of the total rather than 20. But back then, once the special votes were counted, we saw National lose 2 seats. And Labour picked up one, and Te Pāti Māori picked up another. 3 years before that, 2017, we also saw National lose 2 seats. Back then, Labour picked up one and the Greens picked up one. So that could be because you've got a lot of younger people that tend to do the special votes, and we know that a lot of younger voters do tend to favour Labour and the Greens. Overseas voters do tend to favour those parties. Might be different this time. I think something to consider is that a lot of overseas New Zealanders might not have that same love for Labour, or at least this iteration of the Labour Party and the Greens, who have obviously been part of the government, because of the events during the pandemic era in terms of restrictions of coming home and that sort of thing. So I think one of the many things that was really interesting in the election results we saw on Saturday night was Auckland really turning against Labour, and especially in some of those electorates that have been very much Labour strongholds. So there is a lot of angst, and I think in terms of Auckland, I think a lot of that is due to those extended lockdowns. The poor old Aucklanders were in lockdown for a lot longer than the rest of us, and they didn't like that. It made them very unhappy, and they have made those feelings known. When you look at the way the votes landed, and you could see something similar from the overseas voters. You might not see that same swing to the left. So we'll just have to wait and see. But if history is to be believed, then there is every chance that National loses one seat, maybe two. Maybe it'll just be one instead of two, like the last two elections. But the reason that's important is because they've only got that very slim majority, 61 out of 121. If they lose a seat and they've only got 60, they're not there. All of a sudden, National Act don't have the numbers. They need to pick up the phone to Mr. Peters. And we won't know the outcome of those special votes until Friday, November 3rd, which is almost 3 weeks from now. So there's a bit of water to go under the bridge. It's not just the special votes. You've also got the election in Port Waikato. So that electorate needs to be considered. That will take place on Saturday, the 25th of November. So it's still, some time away. Then we'll get the results on the 6th of December, which is almost 8 weeks away. This is all on the Electoral Commission website. You can see the key dates and so forth. So that could put another spanner in the works. A good one for National, though. They're expected to win it, so they would gain that one seat. What it would do, it would increase the size of Parliament by one seat to 122. So then National and Act would have 62 out of 122. That's before we think about the special votes, and by the time this by-election takes place, we'll have seen those. So, it's a moving feast, but it's just something else that will drag out final confirmation. We're not going to see that until early December. Also need to keep a close eye on Tapati Mutu as the special votes are counted. This was really one of the success stories of Saturday night. They won 4 electorate seats, which they weren't expected to do. They're all over Labour in those Māori electorates. And that meant we've got a couple of overhang seats, or one overhang seat, I think it is. And what that means is if because their party vote was only 2.6%, that actually wouldn't be enough to see them get as many as 4 seats. But because they won 4 electorate seats, that means you get a couple of seats added to the mix. So the Parliament actually grows from its typical 120 to something a little more than that. And it's going to grow again after the by-election. But there's actually 2 Māori electorates that are still really close. One is the Calvin Davis's one, and I forget the other one. But 2 that are still really close, neck and neck, in one of those cases at least. And the special votes could see Te Pāti Māori overtake Labour in one of those or both of those. And if that happened, rather than having 4 seats, they might have 5 or even 6. It's not guaranteed, but they're close enough that, you want to keep a close eye on them. And if that happens, you'll have further overhang seats added, which means the size of Parliament will go from, 121 now, 122 after the Port Waikato by-election, to 123 or 124. And if it goes to 123 or 124, that means you need a majority of 62 or 63. National and Act sitting on 61. They'll get one added. That'll take them to 62. But still, there's just no buffer there, especially if you believe that history will repeat itself and they might drop one when the special votes come out. So, look, in short, great result for the National Party. Looks fantastic on the preliminary numbers for National and Act voters and those of us that want the cleanest government possible with the least moving parts. But there are still some hurdles, quite a few actually. And until we've passed those, we won't know whether Winston Peters and New Zealand First are in the mix. If I had to guess, I would say, just looking at how slim that majority is, the most likely outcome is that New Zealand First will still be there. They'll still be required. I think it's likely that something will happen to see National potentially drop a seat, and then they won't have that majority. They will have to pick up the phone. So that's what I was expecting going into this. I didn't see National getting as much as it did, 39%, but that ultimate outcome of having National Act and New Zealand First could still be the way the cards fall. We won't know for a little while, so I think we do need to prepare for several weeks potentially of uncertainty. The current government, Chris Hipkins and his team, will remain, a caretaker government in the interim. So, they're obviously not going to make any major decisions, and if they did, I suspect they would be in touch with Chris Luxon and his team to make sure that they're all on the same page. But it's a bit of a caretaker situation in the immediate future. In terms of the likely reaction, thinking about financial markets, well, I don't think anyone was expecting it to be just National and Act. The prevailing view did seem to be that it would be National, Act, and New Zealand first. So everyone was sort of expecting that anyway. So there's not going to be any disappointment that the margin is quite a slim one, because I don't think people expected National and Act to get there on their own anyway. So I don't think financial markets will take that aspect of this badly, although they would love it to be National and Act, simply because that would be a little bit cleaner. I think you will see an increase in business confidence on the back of these results. We know that businesses and firms tend to favour a national government. I know there's a lot of businesses up and down the country that don't feel heard or understood or appreciated by the current government. So there is definitely a mood for change in many places. However, I think that increase in confidence might just be tempered slightly, given that there'll be a bit of a delay before we know the exact outcome. And we've already seen a bit of a bounce as well. So remember that the last 2 or 3 months of business confidence surveys have seen a strong resurgence in sentiment. I think that is in a large part due to the shift that we've seen in the political polls. So in a way, it's already priced in. It's sort of already there. I'm sure there is a bit more to come, but we've already seen a bit of an increase. As far as share markets go, they also prefer a national-led government. Typically, share markets rise after elections anyway, on average. You look at the last 10, and on average, they've gone up. They tend to go up more when it's a national-led government. So we might see a bit more optimism out there across the NZX. It could be a positive catalyst. Just getting it behind us could be a positive catalyst. The housing market, that is one segment of the economy that is a clear beneficiary of a change of government. National is quite keen on reversing or partially reversing, or in a staggered way at least, some of those changes we've seen, things like interest deductibility rules. And I think National will just generally provide a friendlier backdrop for landlords. So the housing market is probably set to benefit. Having said that, I'm not waiting or expecting sort of a massive increase in house prices. There are still a few challenges there. You've still got mortgage rates that are at quite high levels, 15-year highs, not going down anytime soon. You've got low affordability because prices are still well above pre-COVID levels. They're hardly cheap. So that's a factor. And you've still got the prospect of unemployment potentially rising as the economy slows under higher interest rates and so forth. So still a few headwinds there, but I think an improving housing market will lead to a broader increase in consumer sentiment. We'll also be watching the currency, the Kiwi dollar. We'll see if there's any movement there, a bit of upward pressure on the NZ dollar, or an increase, I should say, against some of those key trading partners, whether it's the US, whether it's Australia. That would be seen as a vote of confidence for the incoming leadership. And interest rate markets too. We'll be keeping an eye on what we see there. Could see a bit of a reaction. There's an expectation that under National, certainly with the influence of New Zealand First and Act, who want to stop some of the spending that they see as wasteful and unnecessary. There is potential for a more frugal approach when it comes to that sort of fiscal position. So that's something we will be keeping an eye on. But lots to digest, and I'm sure there'll be more more negotiations and updates that will come out as the next few weeks pass. But those are my initial thoughts. Hope that's useful, and we will keep a close eye on the situation and update you with anything that we think matters in terms of your investment portfolio. For the time being, I don't think there's any immediate changes anyone needs to make. My take is this is probably a positive from a financial markets perspective, and we'll just evaluate sort of the sector specific and stock specific changes that may or may not come to pass as we get more information. All right, thanks for listening, team.